We play and call it work.
Hey everybody, Matthew here from MiniWarGaming.com, and welcome to this week's Sit and Talk, the show where we sit around and talk about whatever it is that you ask us from the comments from the previous Sit and Talk. We rotate, of course. Next week will be Josh. So if you want to leave some questions for him, leave them in the comments below, whether on YouTube or on MiniWarGaming, it doesn't matter. We'll take a look at them. And then I'm just going to go through all of this and see how many of these I can answer, and either I finish these or up to an hour, whichever comes first. So let's just jump right in here. Pellinor! Hey Matt, how's the heat where you are? Hope you're all keeping cool. Well, we had a bit of a mild May to June, but near the end of June the heat's really picked up, and so it's actually quite hot out right now. I think it's upwards of 28 to 30 degrees Celsius today, which is pretty hot. For our American friends there in Fahrenheit, what would that be? That would be roughly in the 80s, like high 80s to like 90s. Fahrenheit, just doing the quick conversion in my mind. So it can get pretty hot here. Not as hot as obviously some other places in the world, and it only gets hot for a couple of months, and then it goes back to being mild and then eventually cold again in the wintertime. Miso, Matt, hope you're well. Loving the content generally. Thank you. Legion of the Damned is great. Warhammer Fantasy Battle is the best. How is the D&D campaign going? Wizards of the Coast are releasing a series of free adventures to coincide with the release of Forgotten Realms Magic the Gathering. Do you think you'll play it? We're still playing D&D. I was doing two different campaigns with roughly the same group. There was one player who we swap out every other week because the one player can only play every other week. But I kind of burned out trying to do two campaigns at the same time, and so somebody else is taking over as a GM for that one. And then I still have the other campaign that I am doing, and it was a lot of fun. We're at level 14 now, and so we're hitting that kind of epic scale storytelling at this point. So we're having a lot of fun with that. Kind of working on, Steve put the bug in my ear to work on a homebrew world rather than just using modules. Not that modules are bad, modules are great. It's saved me so much time and allowed us to play for this long. We're nearing almost 3 years of playing together almost every single week, which is pretty awesome. And so, but you know, after 3 years of playing D&D, you start to kind of want something different from it. Than just the vanilla Forgotten Realms, whatever. Especially with, the magic items can get boring. Certain aspects of the game can get boring as well. The storytelling's great, of course, but you kind of want some of the mechanics to matter more as well. And so I'm working on that, and we'll see what happens with that. No, I probably won't play the whatever adventures they put out. Just don't have time or desire. Please will you let Luca play some Commander Magic with the new D&D sets? Just one video would be fun. Maybe, we'll see. No plans though. Random Roy, hey Matthew, thanks for getting the Legion of the Damned stuff out. It's fantastic. Simple question, do you prefer Matthew or Matt? People ask me that, and I usually tell them I don't really have a preference. I think, though, subconsciously I prefer Matthew, because that's what I always sign my name as. But it's also a bit of an internet persona thing. Like, for example, you don't say Rob Downey Jr., right? Like, you had to think for a second, who's that? Oh, Robert Downey Jr., or like Michael J. Fox. It's not Mike J. Fox, even though people probably call him Mike. And so when you're creating like an online persona, you usually stick with one of the names. So I always introduce myself as Matthew. And people can call me Matt, it doesn't bother me at all. And it's perfectly fine. And so, but I think because I've always introduced myself as Matthew in all of my businesses and all of my online stuff, that's what I'm just kind of subconsciously used to hearing. But honestly though, it doesn't bother me either way. Phil Hitchings, Warhammer Plus subscription rollout. What are your thoughts, Matt? This is interesting because a lot of people have looked at this, and there's so many thoughts to it. Like the decision that they made to make a subscription service in the beginning. Like they already have a subscription service, of course. They have their Twitch Warhammer TV thing. So they've been doing that for years. So the idea of them charging for you to watch battle reports and reviews and all that kind of stuff is not new. They've been doing that for a long time because some people are like, oh my goodness, they're going to start making battle reports. How do you think this will influence all those YouTubers out there? And I'm just like, they've already been making battle reports and lots of them. Sure, these will be probably higher production quality, but it's the same idea. Like it's still just a battle report in the end. What I've learned from battle reports is that they're unpredictable. I wouldn't be surprised if when they do it, they play several games and they only publish the ones that are really good. They're probably going to put an immense amount of work into it. Josh even said it's probably good for us because they won't possibly be able to put out enough battle reports to satiate people. So they're just going to draw more people into wanting to watch battle reports, but then they're going to have to look elsewhere, and that's where then they come to YouTube. and to channels like MiniWarGaming and other channels that do battle reports. And so they're just going to help grow the market. So I think it's overall a good thing. The whole animations thing, that's kind of a weird one, because I know some people are kind of miffed at the fact that they've basically gone to these fan-made animations and bought them out. But in reality, they kind of had to do something, because if they don't protect their IP, then in a lot of countries, they lose the right to protect their IP. And so by kind of finding a way to be like, well, we want to reward these people who have put so much work into it, and then bring it into the... And the thing that's interesting to me, though, is like, it kind of jumping to this is like, why make it a subscription service? Why not put everything out for free and promote the hobby? Because I have a hard time believing that they can make a substantial amount of money that would make a difference to them. Like when I pictured the Vault and how many subscribers we have, obviously it allows us to do this, right? Like we have several full-time employees who are employed because of it. We've got all these studios, although that's not totally accurate, because that's from Hunter helping us get this building. But still, if it wasn't for us having a successful Vault, this never would have happened. But even before this, we had other studios. We've been able to buy lots of miniatures and terrain. And so, but the scale of economics is very different for us than it is for Games Workshop. And Games Workshop makes hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue a year. And so the question is, okay, let's just do some quick math, right? When they do their online previews, and they're really popular ones, they get like 50 to 80,000 people watching simultaneously on Twitch. And so I can tell you that there's millions of people who watch our videos every year. But that doesn't mean those millions of people are watching like tons of videos. It just means that that's how many unique viewers. So if one person shows up and watches one of our videos for 2 minutes, then that's another unique viewer that year. And so the potential market out there is millions of people, but it's only a subsection of those people who are really gung-ho about the hobby, and then a subsection of them who want to be online looking for information about it, or like consuming media content. And then there's just a portion of them who want to take the time to watch videos. Like I myself prefer articles. I can consume them faster. I can skim through them. Videos I have a harder time with. Since I don't paint, I don't sit around just listening to stuff for a long time. And so I don't need to consume that kind of content. So I prefer written material because I can consume it better. So I actually prefer the websites that do that. Like I'll give a big shout out to Goonhammer, because I loved a lot of their articles, and just like jumping into those to getting like especially the ones that like gave the summaries of the Broken Realms. Those were great, because I tried to read them, I just didn't have time. And so having somebody put up a summary gave me it let me kind of refresh. Whereas if I had to watch a 45-minute video, I was able to skim those articles in about 5 minutes. It's a big difference. So it's just a subsection of that. And so like even if you put, like let's say, and this would be a crazy number of people to be in their subscription, would be like 100,000 people. And that would be, that could be worth it, because that's obviously, well, let's assume they all take the yearly, and I think it was like $50 or $60 a year or something like that. I don't remember. So that would be $5-6 million a year, and that could make a difference, right? Now the amount of money that they have to pay out to do all those animations is probably pretty high. But the thing is, that's like on the extreme high end, and so it's probably going to be a fraction of that, at least at first. And so I'm trying to understand why they would want to put all this effort into a subscription service rather than, really bolstering their social media. But I don't know, there's probably some internal stuff going on there too, where, sometimes it's hard to get a sign off on a project, but if you can show that it's going to make some money, then that'll make a difference too. Maybe they can get 100,000 people in there. Like maybe they will see that kind of growth. I don't know how many people are on their Twitch channel. I would guess thousands at least, if not more, but I really don't know, because I don't know if they publicize that. And so that's the tough part for me, is like choosing to put all this stuff behind a paywall. And obviously I have no problem with putting stuff behind a paywall. That's what we do. It's more just like if I was a company putting out miniatures, and that's where the real money's made, right, is selling these miniatures, then like I get the whole like licensing out IP to make computer games and books and all that kind of stuff, like make other products to sell. So maybe it's just more of that. I just don't see the potential size being big enough to make up for all the attention that they're putting into it. Like all of these battle reports that they're creating that are fantastic quality, if they put those on YouTube, they would get hundreds of thousands of views each, maybe even millions. And it would really help to grow their audience who would buy more of their miniatures and consume more of their expensive products and get more people into the hobby. Because who's going to sign up for Warhammer Plus is going to be somebody who's already a customer, most likely. And so really because you have two choices of what to do with that kind of content, right? Like do you hire those animators? And now I have two choices. Do I sell that content, which will limit its exposure? It's definitely going to limit, you're going to have less people see it than if you put it out for free. That's just a rule of thumb. And that's not a bad thing. Like if movie producers put their movie out for free on YouTube, obviously they get more views on it than selling it, most likely. But then they wouldn't make hardly any money except a little bit of advertising money, which is not worth it to them because they have nothing else beyond it except maybe the merchandising and stuff like that. And so, but in Games Workshop's case, their merchandising is kind of this huge part. So, with kind of the environment out there of streaming services, it's going to be hard to set themselves apart. Now, they're not that expensive compared to things like Netflix and Amazon Prime and all that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of streaming services out there, and so they're going to become, they're in a niche market, and they're launching a streaming service, and that's, which sounds funny coming from me because that's exactly what we did with The Vault, but we're not a big company, we're just a small company, and so any money we can make from that, like if we make a few extra $1,000s in a week, that means something, whereas they make a few extra $1,000s a week, it's like, well, so what? Like they have to make a lot more to make up for all the effort and overhead they put into it. And seeing probably the quality, like I could guess that one battle report that they're going to put out is going to take probably hundreds of hours of time. And you think like Will Wheaton's Tabletop, where he did like these super high production value episodes. I remember he did the Kickstarter, the Indiegogo for season 2 or season 3, and they raised like $1.5 million, but their goal was $750,000, I think, to do 10 episodes. And I think that was pretty generous, meaning like cheap, that doesn't leave them a lot of money because they have a whole camera crew. They showed the behind the scenes, and it was ridiculous the amount of time that goes into just one episode. And I'm sure they get all the filming done probably relatively quickly, but all the preparation for the filming and all the post-production, they stopped doing it, right? Like that show no longer exists, and probably for a good reason, because monetizing it was hard. You might have other reasons, like, well, Will Wheaton didn't want to do it anymore, but that's fine. If the show is a success, it could carry on without Will Wheaton. Like that's the real proof of a success of a show, is that it can exist beyond just the person. That the show itself, the format itself, is good enough. Like you see that with late night talk shows that they go from host to host to host. And not quickly, of course, but they still survive usually each host. Like some are going to be more popular than others, but our movies, right? Like there's different actors in different movies, and lots of movies can be successful, and you don't need the same actor in order for that to happen. So it's interesting. I don't know if I agree or disagree with their choices because I don't have all the information they have, right? And I'm not going to pretend to know when I have so little information from the inside of their business. Those are all the thoughts that kind of came to my mind. Am I worried that it's going to hurt MiniWarGaming? Absolutely not. I actually think it'll help MiniWarGaming because, like I said, it gets people wanting that kind of content, and they can only provide so much of it because they're doing such a high production value, and so they will come to other YouTubers like us who can provide even more entertainment for them. Dragon's Blade, hey Matt, when will you and Dave play a game together? I want to see the dynamic duo in action. I don't know. We don't have a rule that we don't play together. It just doesn't happen very often because of the different kinds of things that we film. 99 Arcturus, hello Matt. If the new Guard Codex came out tomorrow and Cadia had the ability to allow core units to receive 2 orders, do you think that would be enough to bring the Guard in line with the other new codexes? That's an oversimplification, I think. Just if only Cadia had that ability. Receive 2 orders. No, I don't think so. But I'm the wrong person to ask this kind of question to. I don't really play competitive Warhammer 40k. Like whenever we play, I play open war. I don't even play the GT scenarios or the match play scenarios because I don't enjoy them. I enjoyed them at first, but then I got bored of them because they're kind of all samey. And so I just like the crazy randomness of open war, and we'll be hopefully doing Maelstrom of War as well soon, or I love narrative campaigns. So I'm the wrong person to ask that kind of question too. Demon Arrows. Hey Matt, putting aside the issues of whether a woodchuck could chuck wood and whether a woodchuck would chuck wood, while at the same time not getting bogged down in how much wood a woodchuck could chuck, should a woodchuck chuck wood? P.S. Sorry, couldn't resist. Yes, I think a woodchuck could chuck wood, and it should chuck wood, because it's a woodchuck. Otherwise, what would a woodchuck do if not chucking wood? R.K. Ruer, or R. Crewer. Hey Matt, great job keeping us all entertained during the pandemic. Well, you're welcome. It hasn't been easy, not because of you, but because, boy, is the pandemic kind of a downer. We all appreciate it. With so many new things being released by Games Workshop, I'm wondering if you can give us a glimpse behind the curtain on how the relationship works between MiniWarGaming and Games Workshop. Do you guys get a look into the crystal ball on things upcoming? Do you get asked for input on content? Do you have any direct links to ask clarifications and new rules, etc.? Thanks in advance. We don't actually have much, there's not much interaction between us. I think it's safe to say that we receive things from them before the pre-order, because you see that now, obviously. We're supposed to declare that, actually. We got this for free from Games Workshop. And so they send us stuff before, but they do that with a lot of other YouTubers as well, so we're not unique in that. We were one of the first ones that they were sending stuff to early, but then they kind of established, and now we're just like every other YouTuber out there. We just get stuff early. We have some relationships, of course, with people inside the company, but that doesn't really give us any inside information. I've come to realize that, especially because of the pandemic, they often are scrambling to figure out exactly what their releases are. And so, whereas before they could know months in advance, and now it's like, maybe this will be coming out. They kind of know the order of what's coming out or what's coming out, but they don't always have a good date pinned down on things until they can see what their production is going to do. So the pandemic's really thrown that off for them. So I do know that. But that's about it. But other than that, we have a good relationship with them. I think they like us. Okay, first off, Games Workshop is nothing. It's not a thing. It's an organization. Like MiniWarGaming doesn't exist, right? That's an abstract concept of this company. There's Matthew and Dave, and then there's Steve and Luca and Josh and Brandon and everybody else that's involved, right? And so when you say Games Workshop likes MiniWarGaming, that's impossible, because Games Workshop doesn't exist and neither does MiniWarGaming. They're both abstract concepts. So it's people in Games Workshop. And I know there are lots of people in Games Workshop who like us. And there are probably some in Games Workshop who don't like us, for whatever reason it happens to be. Maybe they don't like a review that we did, or they don't like the style that we put out, or they don't like that we make money off of their kind of stuff. But I think that's a minority of people in there. And honestly, I don't even know. I'll be honest. But I just remember visiting there, and the number of people who work for Games Workshop, both at the lower levels and the higher levels, who knew who we were and liked what we did. And that was kind of fun. And so, but that's about it. We don't really have much inside information. In fact, I would say that you learn stuff earlier than we do if you keep an eye on Warhammer community. So it's often the case that I find stuff from just what they post online. That's the earliest I find out stuff. So we just have the benefit, because we're a YouTube channel with enough subscribers, of getting stuff early from them as well. So that's about it for the whole relationship. Phantom Baz. Hello, Matthew. Have you considered using the Soulbound RPG to run a narrative? Not necessarily a Soulbound, but allow the players to create their own characters and make their way in the realms. Do you mean to run a narrative campaign like on the tabletop, or like a role-playing game? Because I love the idea of doing a Soulbound role-playing game, and I've wanted to for a while, but we just haven't had the time. We need to get back to some sense of normality with the pandemic, the borders opening and allowing guests here, because once guests come back, that frees us up more. Because right now it's always producer on producer, which takes more time. Because if you get a guest in, then you only need one producer, and the other producer is free to do other stuff, and so you can get more content done. So we're looking forward to having guests back, both for variety, because we can get tired of playing just each other, and also because it'll allow us to get more content done, and then do more of these other shows. But yeah, I'd love to. There are many great books to go off for ideas. Gloomspite, that's a great book. 8 Lamentations, great books. Plus, the history of the realms is expanding all the time, which means you have a set time to play in or lead into the events that shape that realms. Many thanks, Barry. I'd love to, Barry. I'd love to do a Soulbound role-playing game, and hope to one day, but we don't have any plans right now. Rocky74, 70 IV. Hey, Matt, I love the content. I've been subscribed for a few years now. Well, thank you. The question I have is simply, what kind of updates do you think are coming with the Tyranid Codex? Example, more of a penalty for Psychers for opposing armies. I would also like to see some ideas that would make gaunts more worthwhile, like a -1 to armor for Scything Talons. Please let me know one wish list type thing to make the swarm better. Thanks. I have no idea what they would do for Tyranids. Yeah, like absolutely no idea. I haven't put a lot of thought into it. Having said that, I think like there are ways to play them competitively. Like gaunts are actually the way. You focus on swarms and holding objectives, but that's kind of boring. What I hope to see is just kind of an alignment of internal balance between both internally within the codex, and then things like, there are just little things, right? Like everybody is getting incrementally better, but the Tyranids, like, all the weapon updates for the Imperium stuff, heavy bolters went from 1 damage to 2 damage. Well, Death Spitters are basically mini heavy bolters. They're an 18-inch range, strength 3 shot, strength 5 -1/1, but they're still that, right? Flamers all got extended range, but Pyrovores didn't, because they're not flamers. So they have but they already had enough range that they could shoot things from deep strike. I think it's a 10-inch range. So they're just left behind in the power creep. That's all it really is. And so unfortunately, the way to fix them is simply just to make them stronger, and that's kind of boring. Scything Talons becoming of AP -1, sure, but you can already kind of get that if you make your own custom hive fleet. You can have all Scything Talons get -1. I just want to see the internal balance where, you know, you have a reason to bring everything, and yeah, obviously the power level just needs to be brought up. Their rules are fine. It's just bringing their power, and of course I want Crusade rules. That's what I really want. So just bring their power level up, have them hit harder, survive a bit easier maybe. I'd love to see a new Carnifex kit that brings them to like a humongous size, like an Ultralisk kind of size Carnifex, because they were always the cool monster, and now they're just like whatever. So yeah, but it's just, I think it's just that. I think it's just Codex creep, right? Everything else as it's been released has gotten better, and Tyranids haven't, and so now they're left behind and they're just weaker. So just kind of update all of that, and I'd be happy. And give me Crusade rules. Unpeer, why is Steve so busy? Secret project, practicing for MiniWarGaming and musical? What do you mean, why is he so busy? He's here filming like he always has been. And Matt, it has been said you have been working on the website a lot. Any way of having Vimeo remember where I was in the video when I come back? At the moment, I have to either remember the time or write it down. That's on my list. I haven't actually worked on the website in a while. We've been too busy filming because of the pandemic both allowed me to do it, and then after that we've just been super busy trying to keep up with content, so I haven't really been able to touch it. I want to though. Pellinor again. Hey Matt, if you could pick it up and drop each of the MiniWarGaming team into the Mortal Realms, with which race faction would they feel most at home and why? Steve drop. Well, I think it's just the armies that they like. Luca would just be a vampire, and he would love that. Josh, he could just drop down into and onto the shoulders of a great Gargant, and he'd be happy there. Steve would ride an eel for the Iden of Deepkin while firing one of those awesome-looking bows with the 3 strings that don't make any sense. He would enjoy that. Either that or Josh would want to be on one of the Carriage on Overlord boats. And I'd want to ride a Gore-Grunta into battle alongside some Oryx. So that would be fun. James B.A., hi Matthew. I get you may not want to answer this right now, but I must ask, how do you think the new Warhammer Plus from Games Workshop will impact your business? Okay, let's see if you have any questions that I haven't already answered. Okay, yeah, I've answered all the questions that you basically asked there. So, good questions though, already answered. Mark 3, hi Matthew, I really enjoy your narrative campaigns and have been thinking about trying to run my own. However, keep getting that feeling that I would want to craft my narrative, not the players. Do you get that feeling ever? And if so, how do you scratch that itch? That's what I would do at first, and then I found that it could be frustrating because the players wouldn't buy into it as much. You're always better off writing their story. And so you need to come up with a concept that excites them. That's the first step is you come up with a basic concept. And then second step is you pitch that concept to the potential players. If they immediately get excited for it, you know you got something and you should develop that. If they seem like, yeah, that's kind of cool, then scrap it and start over because you're going to drive yourself crazy trying to get them to actually show up and play. They need to be as excited as you are. And if you can't get anybody to be excited for you no matter what you do, then maybe it's just not something that you should try right now. I hate to say it, but it'll be a frustrating experience. That's even though I work with employees who have to show up for the narrative campaign, I still like to do that because I want the enthusiasm to be there, both for the video and for me. And so I'll do the same thing. I'll walk out of my office. I'm like, hey, I had this idea, blah, blah, blah. And if I see like Luca perk up and like, that's super cool. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to do it. And Luca, you're going to be the player in it. That's what I'm looking for. Or sometimes I'll ask them, I'm like, what would you want to do? What faction would you love to do for a narrative campaign? And sometimes they'll be like, oh, I'd love to do this. Like the whole Hunting the Fallen, that was because Steve was like, I just want to do a Dark Angels campaign where I'm hunting Fallen. I'm like, okay, we've got Crusade rules for that. And so I'll write a story and we'll do that. And he really liked that. And so that's what you got to do that. You can't just have it be your thing. You've got to make it the player's thing. And you've got to be able to be excited for it as well, obviously. Like if they're like, oh, I'd love to do this. If that excites you, then do it. If it doesn't, you got to align those interests. Otherwise, it's going to be frustrating. Let's just put it that way. Nova Kyle. Hey Matthew, sitting here painting 1,000,000 miles of gold trim on my Dusty Boys, Thousand Suns, and getting excited for their new codex. With the recent 9th edition codices not being for armies that focus so much around Psychic, how do you anticipate the Thousand Suns, Grey Knights, and eventually Craft Worlds would fare since they're currently so reliant on Psychic to be effective? The Thousand Suns and Grey Knights army abilities, like their extra range and tests, are nice, but I think this would be a good challenge for Games Workshop to get this right and balance so they're not too mortal wound spammy, all the while still being a balanced force without having to rely on their powers. Love to hear your thoughts, thank you. I'd love for them to have to rely on their powers, of course, but they need to not break the Psychic phase, but at the same time be able to show that that's where they are strong. Like the one hard thing about the Psychic phase is if you've got 6 different things that can cast Psychic powers and your opponent has 1, then they can only deny the witch once, right? And Age of Sigmar kind of addressed that by having heroic willpower, so you can have 1 extra. That's useful, especially if you have a non-wizard army. And so I'm not quite sure how I would address it, but I'm hoping that they still keep the whole Thousand Suns and Grey Knights, the whole Brotherhood of Psychers thing, and they still find a way to do that. And honestly, just keeping it the way it currently is fine, and just adjusting for power creep, I think would be sufficient to bring them up. So, well, we'll see. Octavianus. Hi, Matt. Hope you and your family are well. We are, thank you. I remember one of the team there say you were a movie buff. Ooh, I think you're mistaking me for Dave. Dave is the movie buff. I was flicking in Netflix and watched D. Lynch 1984 Dune. Love it. And think it is close feel to the dark gothic feel of the Imperium. Sure, you may have seen it, and any other movie come to mind that does 40K in the Imperium justice, not Starship Troopers, thanks. I have seen the original Dune from 1984, or not original, or yeah, that's the original one, right? And it's a wacky, weird movie, and you're right, it does kind of have that 40K gothic feel to it, and it even has like the equivalent of the navigators and all that kind of stuff. Another one that's kind of like that is Chronicles of Riddick, the one with the necromongers. They kind of have a similar vibe to how I see 40K. Like they use people to talk through and communicate through, and it's just the way everything looks reminds me of that. So that's the other one that kind of has that dark gothic feel. Starship Troopers, of course, does not. It's more a wacky one, and even though it's like looks like Tyranids versus Imperial Guard, but it doesn't have the same feel. But it's a different kind of movie. I'm not saying it's not good. I'm just saying it's not the same kind of genre or feel. Bucky. Oh, that's to Luca. That's to Luca. Big Mikey. Hey, Matt. Now that it's been out for a little bit, is there anything in Age of Sigmar 3.0 that you wish was changed or adjusted or clarified? Yeah, quite simply, they removed the random turn mechanic. They didn't make it better. The game is so much better than second edition, and in like so many ways, it is tightened up. Command abilities are super cool. I can't wait to see the battle tomes. But why the crap is the stupid random turn mechanic still in there? And they're trying to make it a thing, and it didn't work. I'm just going to say that out loud. They tried to make it a thing, and it doesn't work, and I hate it, and I want it gone. And maybe eventually we'll just write it out ourselves, like we did in the second edition. No promises there, because we're still playing. It's still too early to tell. We've got to play a lot more games before we can come to that conclusion. But giving you an extra command point and the possible third turn thingy if you get double turned is not enough. In fact, even the third turn thing could be argued that it makes the first to second turn double turn that much more powerful, because if your opponent wants to double turn you back, you get to burn one of their objectives. And so no, the extra command point doesn't make up for it. Not at all. Not in the least. Not worth it. The redeploy strategy or the command ability helps because it lets you react a bit in your opponent's turn. Unleash Hell helps because it lets you do something in your opponent's turn. But no, that's what I would change. There's little nitpicks here and there. Like I don't like all the pluses to saves. I don't like how Mystic Shield went back to being a +1 to save. Because they said, well, we cap it at +1, but in reality, everything's got rend, and so you cap it after all the modifiers are done. So you throw Mystic Shield on something, you get a +1 save. It's all of a sudden a better spell than most things that you have in your book. And then they all out defense, and now they're at +2. And so basically, unless somebody doesn't have a rend, it's essentially bringing their save up by 2, which is nuts. And so I don't like Mystic Shield being +1. I don't mind all out defense being +1. I think that's kind of fun. Mystic Shield, I don't just make it go away. Just don't have it as a spell. Even re-rolling 1s would be too much combined with the all out defense and things like that. But Arcane, overall, I love everything they did. The new Path to Glory system is super cool. But why the heck is there this random turn mechanic? It just doesn't work. It doesn't make the game better. It only makes it worse. And it rarely doesn't make the game better. So that's what I would change. And I say that with I really don't like that in there. And it kind of ruins the game for me. And so just going to say it like that. But other than that, it's a fantastic game. Eli Jenkins. Matthew, any plans for a large-scale Path to Glory campaign using a new Age of Sigmar rule set? I'm about to start an Age of Sigmar campaign with Luca, where he takes the part of a vampire lord that's just rose to power in the realm of metal, and has taken over a city that has a realm gate between the realm of metal and the realm of beasts, and it's going to be a map-based campaign where he's going to move out and conquer territories using the Path to Glory rule set, slightly modified for a map-based campaign, because it doesn't really need a map. It just, you just roll randomly. This is the territories that are there, and you just pay to take them over. We're not going to do it that way, and we're not going to use their quests mechanic, but we're going to use all the other stuff from it. So we're using 80% of it. So not a grand scale campaign, because it's still GM'd. It's still going to be games master and a player. Not going to be multiple players using the Path to Glory. But it's kind of, I don't know if a multiple player Path to Glory would be that interesting anyways, because there's no end game. It's just hey, we just all play and whatever happens. Whereas the old Path to Glory had an end game of ascending to demonhood or getting to a certain number of glory points and then you're done. So you can always set those as well. But so no plans of doing a massive Path to Glory, but a plan soon that you'll see an Age of Sigmar narrative campaign using this system, because it looks really cool. Demo Jr. Hey Matthew, hope you and the rest of MiniWarGaming are doing well. It has been a long time since I have seen White Scars in the bat rep, and I hear they are doing pretty well this edition. Any chance we can see Vito bring his White Scars in anytime soon? Vito doesn't work here anymore, and so it's not likely you'll see him anytime soon. Doesn't mean he's not able to come in as a guest, of course, but so I don't know, but no plans. Simon Kieran, Matt, Warhammer Plus battle reports. Yeah, I've already answered that. Do you consider this as an opportunity or a threat to the very existence of MiniWarGaming? It'll help us. It's only going to be good for us. Will we have certain people who'll be like, I won't be a Vault member because I'd rather Warhammer Plus? Sure. But I think the number of people that we will get, more viewers will get because of it, will outweigh that. It's kind of like if there's a restaurant in the middle of the city and there's no restaurants within several miles, they'll actually benefit from other restaurants opening around them, because then it gives people more variety and it draws more people in. So the same thing happens with this kind of thing. There's always that assumes that your food is good. If you're a crappy restaurant and a good restaurant opens next to you, then you might drive you out of business. And I assume that we're good because we get lots of views and we have a lot of Vault members, and that's been the case for 14 years now. And so I'm not concerned. It'll require some adjustment to kind of how we think, and it'll help us learn new things, and we'll analyze it and we'll figure it out. General Wolf. Hey Matt, I hope you are well. My question to you, sir, is, now that you have somewhat indulged in the 3rd edition Age of Sigmar, how do you feel about the changes as a whole? Okay, I already answered that. So as a whole, fantastically better than 2nd edition, because as much as I complain about the random turn mechanic, that was there in 2nd edition, so it's still there. Did they fix it? No. Did the game get better? Oh yeah, by a long shot. I think 3rd edition is just so much better than 2nd edition, and it's so much more interesting. The random turn mechanic. So yeah, if I wasn't filming, I would house roll right away. No random turn mechanic. Heck, the second player could still get the extra command point, because going second could be a big disadvantage if you're not going to be able to have random turns. Baron of Silliness. I have 2 questions. 1, will there be any Space Wolves narrative campaigns? Maybe. And any more realms? Are there more armies? Any more realms? What do you mean by any more realms? Are there more armies? I'm not sure what you mean by those questions. We have no plans to do a Space Wolf narrative campaign, but we don't plan much further out than the next couple of narrative campaigns. NL, dear Mr. Matthew, new edition for Age of Sigmar, new Stormcast. What rules would you wish them to have? As you've played them quite a bit in second edition. I guess you can say quite a bit. To make them feel like the ultimate warriors of the realm. I was thinking something like Armor of Sigmarite, ignore all mortal wounds in a 5+, and ignore one level of Rend to make them hard as nails. Oh, that would be awful. Please, no. Ignoring one level of Rend is OP as heck. And so you got to make them super expensive. And that goes for either 40k or Age of Sigmar. Especially when you have a game like Age of Sigmar where you can all-out defense and you have Mystic Shield. Like, it's just like, no, ignoring the level of Rend. How do you make them better? Well, that's easy. Once again, a lot of their army has suffered from Codex creep or Battle Tome creep, where, when they first came out of Liberator, having 2 attacks that were 3s and 4s, and then having a 4-up save, re-rolling 1s was a big deal. And now it's like, yeah, well, that's pretty crap. So you bring them up to the standard, either dropping their points or making them more killy or more survivable. At the very least, 3s and 3s, maybe with a Rend, or you come up with some other rule with them. So it's just a matter of just rebalancing everything. Like, obviously they're coming out with a whole new line of models, the Thunderstrike models, and those will have their own rules. And then it looks, they probably add into the Allegiance ability that when they die, they do lightning damage to you and mortal wounds and all that kind of stuff. So it's just, a lot of these things, it's just a matter of bringing them to the same scale as the other armies that are currently out. And I hope they do a good job with that. I don't want the Stormcast Eternals to be like so overpowered that they like dominate it for the next couple of years, but I do want them to be powerful because they've always kind of suffered, except for some very specific parts of them, like the Sacrosanct, from not being that great. And so it'd be nice if they kind of demonstrated just what the Stormcast Eternals are, kind of like Space Marines. Obviously, there were times in 40k where Space Marines just weren't that great. And it just kind of felt like a bummer. It's like what Space Marines are like Space Marines, and so they should be great. Now that I feel like they're kind of where they should be, where they're good, they're quite solid, but not necessarily the most overpowered ever. But they're solid, and they can play quite well. And I think that Stormcast Eternals should be the same kind of idea, where they're solid. They should be a good beginner army, where somebody who's new to the game can kind of just plop them down and just their built-in stuff just makes them good. You don't have to be as tactical with them. And then, of course, you add the nuance of the tactical stuff with all the huge line of miniatures that they have and all the different combos and sub-factions and things that you can do with them. So you need a bit of both because they're going to draw people in, so you need to make them both accessible and then have a lot of depth to them. Now, their model range is huge, so just make sure the whole range is usable. I hate that, like Griff Chargers are so cool, but they're just garbage. So make them better, and Liberators and all the stuff, the Star Drakes, make them actually good. All this kind of stuff. So yeah, that's what I hope to see with Stormcast Eternals. But no, not army-wide, ignore mortal wounds and a 5-up and 1 level of Rend. That would be dumb, and they'd have to be super overcosted, which would then make them not any good at hitting power, and you don't want to see that. Okay, well, that is all the questions that I do have today. Remember that next week is going to be Josh, so you can leave your questions for him. Thanks so much for your questions, and thanks so much for your support. Stay tuned for more Sit and Talks and other wargaming content. Happy wargaming.